Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat Podcast, a platform that features professionals across a variety of industries and promotes growth mindset principles with a central pillar of championing the achievements of women. Our conversations explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to growth and empowerment. Today, VPG founder Ashley Chung is speaking with Jackie Bonilla, a director in Sterne Kessler's Biotechnology and Chemical and Trial and Appellate practice groups. An accomplished intellectual property attorney, Jackie spent more than a decade at the Patent Trial and Appeal Board of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, including 6 years as Deputy Chief Administrative Patent Judge. Jackie's practice focuses on patent litigation and pre-litigation matters for life sciences, including advising on PTAB challenges and policy, ex parte reexaminations, and federal district court and appellate litigation. With a PhD in cellular and molecular pharmacology, Jackie brings deep scientific expertise to matters involving biotechnology, diagnostics, pharmaceuticals, chemical compositions, medical devices, and more. Let's get started.
Hi, Jackie. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. Today is your holiday party at Sterne Kessler.
Yeah. Hence the jacket.
Hence the jacket. Thank you so much for saying yes to this. I really appreciate it. Are you excited?
I am. I've been watching your podcasts, and they're great. It's a terrific way to meet people and get messages out. So I'm just honored to be included. So thank you.
Are you trying to know why I started the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
I am so fearful of public speaking. So when I first started PPG, I met a brand strategist, and I went to one of his marketing classes. Business, you have to do business development, and I was a paralegal. I didn't have to do business development. Prior to VPG, I was working at Finnegan, and knew that you are also Finnegan alum. And I didn't know how to really market myself, and I had such a hard time speaking and being super self-conscious. So this brand strategist told me, go join Toastmaster International. So I've been looking at this during campus. I could not find anything that is really consistent in my neighborhood. So I decided that maybe I should start a podcast.
Awesome.
So that's how it goes. I started one, and then I started another one, and now I have 3 podcasts. So Virtual Water Cooler Chat is finishing season 3, and it'll be season 4 in January. First thing first, I wanted to hear, how did you become an attorney, and especially IP?
Yeah, because my journey is pretty weird how I ended up. I was an undergraduate major, very first starting out, and I was a psychology major. And it turned out that all the psychology classes were full. I couldn't get in them. So I took chemistry and biology and some of those intro classes, and I ended up really liking them. So I ended up switching my major altogether. I switched it to biochemistry. So I graduated with a biochemistry degree, and in my undergraduate class, nearly everybody was pre-med. And I decided I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go to grad school and get a PhD instead. And so I did that. I went to grad school, and I was planning on doing the whole academia thing or go into industry. That was the plan. And then when I was in grad school, which is kind of ironic in light of today's times, but at the time, it looked like funding was getting more and more hard to come by. And so I started thinking outside the box of what I wanted to do with my PhD, which I had a PhD in pharmacology. So it was life sciences, molecular biology, that kind of stuff. And I thought I was so clever at the time because I thought about, patent law. I thought it was so different and so unique, and that turned out not to be the case. But I actually cold called an attorney in Washington, D.C. I cold called a few of them in Washington. I said, hey, I'm a PhD student. I'm getting ready to graduate. Is patent law a viable thing for somebody like me? Every one of them said absolutely. And I remember there was one guy I talked to, and he said, well, I just won trial, so my answer is definitely yes to you today. But it seemed like a really neat and unique thing to do that not a lot of people are even thinking about. I think that's different today. People think about it more, I think, even in grad school than they did back then. So I did that, and then I ended up going to law school. It was funny because at the time they weren't hiring examiners. There was a freeze, and so I couldn't even do that. That was what I thought I was going to do at the time. I was going to become an examiner and go to law school at night, which a lot of people do. But it didn't work out because they weren't hiring at all. So I ended up going to law school. And when I was in law school, I was thinking about everything. Like, what can you do with a law degree and a PhD? So I thought about corporate law. I thought about FDA law. I even thought about criminal forensics, things like that, and patent law. There was a criminal law professor who was really nice. He actually got me a tour at Quantico to check it out. That was really fascinating. But the thing that ended up being a fit was patent law, so I ended up doing the summer associate thing, and I really, really liked it. Then, of course, I went to the law firms and did the whole path that you see, get me where I am today. It was interesting because when people talk about mentoring and where to go and how to see your career path, I tell people that what you think you might want to do today is not at all what you're going to end up doing. You can really shift and pivot, and you should be ready for it and kind of set the groundwork for unexpected things that can come up for you professionally, because that certainly worked for me.
When did you decide that you wanted to leave private law and then go into government at the USPTO?
I was at law firms. I was at Finney & Henderson for 2 years, and then I clerked for a year and a half with Judge Rader. And then I was at Foley & Minor, and I ended up being a Foley & Minor for about 10 years. Throughout all of that, I did a lot of work on interferences and some ex parte appeals too. But interferences was stuff. I mean, some of these were really like multi-million-dollar, big money interferences. And I just loved it. And I saw some hearings with the APJs. I was like, wow. To me, that was the coolest thing ever. I actually applied to be an APJ at some point when I was relatively junior, and I don't even think I made it past the first HR cut. That was that. But it was something I was always thinking about. I thought it would be really exciting to be a part of. It's an incredibly fun and impactful job. So it was always in the back of my mind. And then in September 2011, the American Events Act passed. And there was sort of a bunch of things going on at once. There was AIA, which they had to implement, and they needed people to do that. But also at the time, there was a very large backlog on ex parte appeals at the board. So they were hiring. And I think the very first time I saw the posting, I think within days I applied because I was just so excited about it. Somebody had given me a heads up that they were posting because they didn't post for APJs for a really long time. And there was a posting and I just... And I was starting it. It was like, yay, pick me. I got lucky because they were hiring. At the time, they needed lots of people like me. So I ended up making that transition, and it was just incredible to go to the board, actually, because it was such a unique time to go because there was this core of people who'd been there for a long time who were amazing. They were amazing mentors, just so smart. But then you had all this influx of people coming in from the outside, and all of these people were amazing and smart, but also had never been at the board. So just the friendships we developed and the camaraderie and the congeniality that you saw between everybody was just so amazing. It just created this unbelievable place to work, and you learned so much so fast, and all of this stuff, and especially in AIA, there was so much that people hadn't figured out yet. So it was like, okay, well, how do we answer this question? We'll have to figure that out. That was really amazing. And I will say, times are a little bit turbulent right now, but as a general matter, working in government service is truly incredible. I mean, obviously it doesn't pay as well, but what it does in terms of professionally giving you opportunities that you might not otherwise ever have, and also giving back and being part of the bigger picture of how the system should work, and into making sure that the stakeholder community in patent law has what they need to do whatever it is that's happening. To be a part of that is really incredible. It makes you feel like you're really contributing.
That's really amazing. I've always had a lot of admiration for civil servants, the pay cut from private law to go into public law, and for government to really just protect and promote innovation. I think that is really admirable. So thank you for being part of that. For me, for example, I've done litigation the entire time. So I started out in construction litigation. I said, I don't want to do the construction. So I went on to do a GW paralegal program. And one of my professor at the time was an associate at Morgan Lewis and Buckingham, and I took his IP course. And then he was like, I think they need to lead construction.
You thought you had a sparkle on.
Maybe. I did well in my IP course for the paralegal program, and then somebody was like, I think you would do well in IP. I said, what part of IP do you think is that 4 parts, right? So patent, trademark, trade secrets, and copyright. So this is how he explained it to me. He was like, I think you would do well in patent. I'm like, but I don't know anything about patent. But then, do you know anything about construction? I'm like, no. Can you figure it out? He was like, I think you do well because there's a lot of transferable skills. In construction, we did a lot of specifications, critical path management schedule, a lot of things that I don't understand what they're doing. But you know, I just read. He was like, I think you do well in patent because litigation is litigation.
And having good attention to detail is paramount.
Yeah, exactly. He was like, you're kind of a big picture person. I don't see you doing trademark. It's too administrative. I was like, okay.
I think trademarks is great. It's fun.
Yeah, well, I have been patent the entire time. So I pigeonholed myself a little bit. I had to apply for my own trademark for virtual patent gateway. I listened to his advice, so the entire time was patent litigation. I worked at in as well, and I did mostly district court, ITC. I do not like ITC cases. It's too fast of a schedule. It's not great for my sanity. I admire all the people who can do it. It's not for me. When the AIA came out, I was trained to do this, and the person who trained me then left. So I was kind of left with that and have to figure out a lot of stuff. And thank God we have a lot of really amazing PTAB attorneys at Appellate. And eventually I promoted to be a PTAB litigation assistant coordinator. They need me to be on the hook. When it's not my case, like, actually, we got 20 minutes. This needs to be done. You cannot say it's not your case. Since 2014, I started working on AIA cases. I was also an active case manager, so I do a lot of the other cases, managing my D. It was really interesting how both ITC and PTAB cases, I'm an administrative law. I don't enjoy the ITC part, but I really enjoy the PTAB procedures. And in 2017, my dad passed. I had to figure out exactly how do I make a living in a litigation environment and not completely suck in my evaluation, because I will have to really juggle a lot of things that I don't know how to juggle. 2 years later, I was working so hard, and then I sort of burned out. I talked to some friends, and it was like, why don't you just do consulting? I was like, Lady, it took me 8 months to decide that I can do it. So I wrote my resignation letter 8 months in advance. I know people can actually talk me out of it because it's such a scary move. My financial advisor, my friends, everybody, they're actually having bets about whether I'm going to go through with it. And I did.
Good for you. That's a bold bid. It's terrific.
In 2 days for B5 years. My practices really are PTAB, IPR, PGR. So when I first started, people were asking, can you start your company earlier? Because I have cases for you. This is a natural segue. Can you share with us the difference between inter partes review? CBM has already sunset cover business method. Post-grant review, those are like the pre-tab with the PTAB body, and then ex parte reassess.
I think it can be a whole nother segment about the changes that are happening at the office generally and at PTAB and an AIA in particular. But one of the consequences of a lot of those changes is that I think people are thinking more about ex parte exams than they might have before. There's all sorts of things. There's the discretionary denial factors, which are impacting things, but other things that are happening that are impacting the expense and resources involved in the AIA trial too. Things like having to determine real party and interest. And there's a new policy that boards need to explain if they come to a different conclusion than another forum or either in or out of the office does, for example, quick construction and validity or whatever that is. So people are thinking a lot about reexams, and I have a list here of the differences, and I'm looking at it to make sure I don't forget anything. So there are some things that apply to ex parte reexams that don't apply in AIA proceedings, in IPRs or PGRs. One of them is that there's no estoppel against a third-party requester. So if there's a final written decision in an AIA trial, estoppel attaches to the party, the petitioner, and the real party in this privity. That doesn't happen upon the final determination in the next party reexam. So that has impact. A lot of the discretionary denials in AIA happen under what's known as 35 USC 314A, and that provision doesn't apply to ex parte exams. So all of this new stuff about the age of the patent or FinTIM considerations and all that stuff, that doesn't apply in ex parte exams. But one thing that does apply in both of them is 35 USC 325D. That's a discretionary consideration that says if the same or substantially the same arguments or prior were before the office, that the office has discretion to deny the proceeding. So that still applies, but all the other discretionary denial considerations, including all the new ones that you're hearing buzzing around, they don't apply in ex parte exam. Another really important distinction is that third-party requesters can file a request for ex parte exam anonymously. So there's no such thing as a real party and interest requirement. And that means people can file and people don't even know who they are. That's a pretty big difference. But on the other hand, one big difference that people take into account is, so inter partes reexams were replaced by IPR, so they don't exist anymore, inter partes reexams. So in an ex parte reexam, once the requester files its request, with some exceptions, but for the most part, they're not involved anymore anymore. It's the patent owner at that point who is engaged with the examiner. And so they can put forth declarations, they can put forth amendments. There's not going to be any depositions of those experts, things like that. So at that point, it's just between the examiner and the patent owner. So a lot of people who are in a position that they want to challenge patent claims and litigate patent claims, they actually would prefer an IPR or PGR because they can participate in the proceeding, they can respond, they can depose witnesses and things like that. When people are deciding whether to do, for example, an IPR or ex parte re-exam, they're going to take that into account too. The other thing is that if a CRU comes to a final determination and the patent owner doesn't get what they want, they can appeal to the board. So actually, it's worth noting that an appeal or ex parte re-exam is an ex parte appeal at the PTAB. And then at that point, they can also, if they lose, appeal to the Federal Circuit. But that third-party requester isn't involved. If it doesn't go the way they like, unlike in an AIA proceeding, they don't have standing, they're out. So they don't participate at all in any kind of appeal, whether it's at the board or at the Federal Circuit. I mentioned they can amend claims. The one thing that's interesting about a patent owner amending claims in the ex parte re-exam is once there's a final determination, then 325D comes into play. So patent owners in a position to bulletproof a little bit more on their claims that they get in an ex parte re-exam because now it's something the office has considered. And that can help in that and also just in other discretionary denial considerations in an IPR later. There are some similarities in the types of grounds that they cover. So a PGR can do pretty much everything, I think, except best mode. But for IPRs, it has to be based on a patent or printed publication for 102 or 103 for anticipation of business. In ex parte re-exams, it's similar to IPRs, although they can actually also do double patenting challenges. So there's that. The other big thing, and I mentioned this, is the fact that the requester can file anonymously. And so one of the things we've seen is sometimes even after a district court litigation where they've gone the whole mile on that, somebody can anonymously request a re-exam at the central re-exam unit. So all of those differences are good for people to keep in mind. A patent owner can file either a reissue or a re-exam at the CRU. AIA petitions can only be filed by anybody other than the patent. If a patent owner or any party who's concerned about free to operate, they're going to want to think about what their options are in terms of filing. If somebody is free to operate, do they want to challenge those claims? If they think those claims are unpatentable, do they want to challenge them? If so, where and how they want to do that? I think everybody needs to think about these proceedings and figure out what they want to do, what makes the most sense for them procedurally. And I will say these ex parte re-exams and reissues, they're really important tools for patent owners. And that's especially true if they're thinking about asserting them in any way, even if it's just to say, hey, I want you to license. And it also can be important for funding because a lot of venture capital people will say, hey, look, what's going on here? Is somebody else going to say that you have a problem? So it's important, especially if you're going to sue somebody, to really do diligence and make sure that your claims are solid. And as I mentioned, going back into a CRU, go back into re-exam and solidifying them can make them have a stronger position for a denial under some of these discretionary denials. Plus, it just makes it stronger, whether it's in district court litigation or otherwise. They have a much stronger position. So it's an important tool to consider before asserting.
For the last 2.5 years, I started doing a lot more ex parte re-exam filing. I'm not a patent prosecution paralegal, so my entire career has been on litigation. So PTAX, for example, when we're filing, is still very much like a litigation type of filing database, platform. Patent center is not.
It's still more like prosecution.
Yes. I thought I'd come in and do the niche practice, IPL, PGL, and like CBM was still there. We would do that. But someone came to me and asked me to do ex parte re-exams. The firm, I didn't do it.
Right.
I only serve. I was like, oh, other people can do it. But when you run your own business, you cannot do that.
You gotta pivot.
You gotta pivot. If you don't, you lose your other business.
Right.
Because they'll find somebody else. I'm good at learning. If not, I'll figure it out. At first, it was EFS Lab, and then I was retired. Hunt Repair also retired, and I'm patent center. The most challenging thing is really removing embedded data. Because every time you upload, it's like you have different fonts, you cannot do this.
Yeah.
But I figured out when my associate was really nice, I was like, how do you get it to the point that you could actually upload?
Yeah.
So he told me, so I've been able to do that. Because otherwise, I would have to flatten the PDF and have to scan and...
The attention and detail that you need for all of
my
that
God.
stuff, whether that's at the PTO or in court filings, it is not trivial.
And you know what is funny is that my attorneys can write the whole request. And I have so many people tell me, I don't know how you do your job. Because I would not want to be the one that pushed that submit button.
There's major liability if anything goes wrong administratively with it.
Yes. And then I was like, well, I mean, we go through the review and fold and stuff like that. So I've done so many ex parte re-exam filings. So now there are actually firms asking me to train their paralegals.
And that's probably a shift, probably seeing an uptick
Yes.
in that this year.
Because before they were asking me to train them on PTAB, like IPR, PGRs, and I'll just train them. And I'm like, you just like need to think about ex parte because that is going to be up and coming.
I think that that's right, because I think at PTAB, over the 13 years or whatever, people figured that out. They made sure they had a good paralegal and docketing system and all that stuff for PTAB. And a lot of people didn't, and especially a lot of the firms who engage in litigation, like they didn't really think about ex parte reexaminations. They did think of that more as prosecution. There's advantages to doing an AIA petition, as we just talked about. But I think with everything going on, people are having a conversation again about that, which I think is great.
We're all pivoting.
You all have to pivot. I think regardless of what's going on in the world, you have to be able to change and adapt to what's going on. And so much of what we do know is applicable to it, but you just have to figure out how to take it and move it and expand and grow with all that.
We're entitling this podcast episode as Empower Her Leadership Journey. What does empowerment and leadership mean to you?
So I think in terms of empowerment, it's really about how you can lift up others. And it's succession planning. It's making sure that you have a team that can do the work that you need and making sure that you help people grow. I think this is particularly important when people are junior attorneys and even when they're 5 to 10 years out. That's when you grow into whatever it is, whether you're in the government or private practice or a company. That's when that transition happens to going into leadership positions. When you talk about empowering others, you're really talking about, especially if you yourself are established and been working for a couple decades and you've been in leadership positions and you know what that looks like and you start to be well connected with other people who are of the same ilk. I think it really refers to figuring out how to empower others to get there. So you make sure that you open doors where you can. You make sure people get the training that they need, they get the introductions that they need, that they are involved in bar groups and organizations and things that whatever company or firm you work at, wherever it is, tell somebody, think about this leadership position. I was thinking about what you just said about how you feared public speaking. There's a lot of people who fear public speaking. And if you're good, you'll probably be nervous about that for the rest of your life, honestly. But you get over it and you can get good at it even if you're really scared about doing it. Just encouraging them to go outside of their comfort zone. And they'll say, hey, why don't you do this speaking event? Why don't you be on this panel? Why don't you do this webinar and whatever? There are opportunities like they have at LEAP at the USPTO. They have them in district courts and elsewhere too, where there's opportunities for more junior lawyers to speak in court. One of the things I really liked about LEAP is it said, hey, you can go up there. We know you're new. You have a backup. If something goes off the rails, that person can step in for you as needed. This is a safe place for you to do it and try. In my experience watching the people who did LEAP at PTAB was they were all just unbelievably fantastic. They were terrified, so they were radically overprepared, probably more so than the attorneys who are experienced. And they were really good. And I thought PTAB was actually a great place to do that because the PTAB judges just want their questions answered. They don't care how slick it is. They're not a jury, right? They don't need some smooth story. They need to talk to somebody who knows the record and explain why they apply to the law that they're dealing with. In any event, I bring that up because I think as somebody who's more experienced, you're in a position to make sure that people know about those opportunities, that they're given those opportunities, that they meet people, and just tell people to go outside their comfort zone and encourage them to do so and give them a safe place to do it. Another thing, too, I tell people is career paths can go, we talked about this already, in radically different directions. So be open to that. Be bold. It's the whole thing. The definition of courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the taking action when you're terrified. Really being there and encouraging people to do that. Think about your own life. You're wondering whether you should do something and a friend says to you, you should totally do it. You'll be great. That has a huge impact about whether you might pull the trigger. And having that come from somebody who's a respected leader already and saying that to people who aren't there yet, I think is really impactful.
As leaders, it's voluntary position. I've interviewed Dr. Rory Cooper, who is in the National Inventor Hall of Fame. He talked about rotational leadership. And I've been really thinking about this because psychological safety is so important in work culture, especially these days. So we live in a very challenging time. Not everyone is willing to challenge a leader. I think leadership benefit from having challenges because you get better work product, you get better battery. I'll give you an example. I'm busy filing, so I'm working on something and I had basically generated an AI. I looked at the format. I was like, it looks fine. I didn't really review it, sent it to my team. Can you guys take a look at it and let me know what you think? And not one person responded. And I didn't have time because I was busy filing. My focus needs to be on filing. I don't want to lose my business. So that is a lower priority, but I need someone to give me feedback. Not one person give me feedback. Finally, I had the chance to look at it. 3 minutes later, I was like, what did I just send them? I called one of the persons. did you receive that email I sent you?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I said, do you have any feedback for me? They're like, that's not written in English. It's gibberish, basically. My prompts were horrible, probably. I was like, how do I count on you guys as a team? I want feedback. If something does not make sense, you need to challenge me. You need to say, actually, what are you thinking? I would prefer that. That was one of the discussions that I had with the other guest, Jamie Siegel. And when I told him, he was like, actually, you and I are probably comfortable challenging people, but most people do not. They don't want to get on the other side. They don't want to seem like
annoying or not somebody you should be included.
Like that. I don't think that I used to be comfortable with that. And I think a lot of changes in my leadership style is actually when I come out to do my own thing, I've had people tell me that you're horrible at what you do to my face. I really have been very cognizant and trying to figure out how best to make it safe for others and then not feel horrible about myself.
Right.
How do you handle that?
Moving up the ranks and in leadership positions as I had over the years, I watched other people, and you learn from others what works and what doesn't work, especially if it's really critical that you have a top-notch product going out fast, which used to happen all the time. And it does happen all the time to everybody. And I think it's really important that the team, first of all, feels comfortable talking to the leader at all, which means they have to know that. But there has to be some connection there. So I think taking the time as a leader to talk to people, everybody on the team, no matter who they are, just to make sure that they've had some kind of connection so they actually know them, so they feel comfortable calling them, they feel comfortable sending an email. Because I think you're absolutely right. I think when you actually are a leader, you forget that it's intimidating that you are. And to you, you're like, it's not that, like, wait, what's the big deal? But for everybody else,
I'm just
asking a question. But for other people, it can be a really big deal and very intimidating, especially if they're not natural extrovert who says whatever's on their mind, which is a lot of people, especially in patent law, as it turns out. Having that connection and telling people that you have an open door to talk to them, even for 5 minutes, just to understand who they are, what their concerns are, what they want to do with the organization, that is actually huge. What I see being very effective as a leader is if you need to do a project, whatever that project is, that you get the team of people you know who are excellent to do it, subject matter experts, and you say to them, look, this is what I'm thinking we should do. Why don't you let me know how we can get there? And then when you do that, have maybe 4 or 5 different ways we can get there. And then for each one, I want pros and cons for why they would work or not work. And then based on that, we'll have a conversation and pick the way to go. Whatever's the best way to do whatever your project is. Putting it that way tells people flat out, you do need to push back on the very position that whatever it is the leader told you they wanted you to do, so that people know what are the pros and cons. Why is this good? Why is it not good? What's going to go wrong? Where's the liability? What are naysayers going to say? And I think if you don't create an environment where people feel comfortable saying it, they won't. Because they'll figure, well, somebody else will tell them. I don't necessarily get in trouble for not saying anything, and I might get in trouble for saying something. And the other thing is sort of along the same lines is it needs to be okay if somebody says something and it turns out it's wrong. Obviously, if somebody does that on the regular, maybe they need some training or what have you. But if people feel like if I say something wrong, if I'm not perfect in my answer all the time, then they're not going to talk either. So if you're having good discussions and good powwow sessions to figure out what to do as a leader with your team, it has to be okay that somebody said something and then later on went, oh, whoops, that was totally wrong. I meant this. You have to allow for that, because I think otherwise it just chills discussion. And I agree with you completely. When you as a leader think, oh, okay, I want to do this, you really need to have feedback for the people who know. A lot of times as a leader, the people on your team know a lot more about it than you do. And so you really need to rely on them to tell you. And so just creating that safe place where they can do it, saying that this is a critical part of their job is to do that, to not be over the top and not be, negative Nelly for no other reason, but to legitimately have the conversations about what's working and what isn't, I think is something you have to do. I mean, that's what I've seen throughout my career in terms of what's the most effective leadership, especially when you have to get really high-end work product done fast.
I think that I'm more comfortable with my own skin.
That probably happened over time. And so when somebody's newer, they're not going to do that. So cultivating that and encouraging people to do that.
So I'll give you an example. We were working on some requests, internal contents. I was like, patent attorneys, they should stick with what they do, the word processing, leave it to other people to do it. I'm not great at it. So I have people that would do that. I gave it to one of the person who is really good at word processing. And I gave her a document. So can you please review this? Because I need to work on the exhibits, blah. So I gave it to her to review and edit. And then table of contents, for whatever reason, it does not have the ellipsis. Joanne and fix all the other format, come back. I'm like, where is the ellipsis? She goes, this is how you gave it to me. I said, oh, okay, I won't make your excuses. I'd like you to think to the next level. It is not helpful to me if you know that there's problem and come in and say, oh, this is how you give it to me. This separate you from the next level of A player. So what I'd like you to do for the next time, I mean, it's fine. I'm not blaming you. I'm just coaching you on what would make you from a B player to an A player. How do I trust you? You come back because I'm busy.
Right.
You know, I'm counting on you. So these are the steps that you need to do. If you have a question, actually, this does not have ellipsis. Well, you know, I've seen it doesn't have it. I said, take a look at the table of content. If you don't have the ellipsis, how do you line up the page number? Visually, it's not helpful. Again, I'm not blaming you. I'm just coaching you what you should be doing next. Question. I always rather people question me before the work product go out because it's still something you can fix.
Right.
Once it goes out, you cannot fix it without a lot of problems. So that's how I'm learning and I'm talking to them. So it was a really good self-discovery journey to close our chat. Women attorneys, especially in IP, we don't have a whole lot of them. What would you say or do to encourage people to get into IP?
It's so funny. Some people think that patent attorneys are the most boring, like that's the hard and the most boring thing to do. I remember there was an interview with Justice Scalia. They asked him what his favorite case was and what his worst case was. And his worst case, he said, was a patent case because to him it was boring and it was hard. But I think the interesting thing about that is that's exactly why it's also super exciting. If you have any kind of technical background, regardless of what it is, thinking about it in terms of the law and what you can do to promote science through the law, through patent law. Patent laws are intended to promote innovation, but you have to strike that perfect balance of not too much and not too little. And being able to figure that out and getting into the complicated weeds of the technology and the law, I mean, it's three-dimensional chess. It's hardcore. And I think that people who might think it's boring, it's because they don't understand all the language and everything else. But once you start, especially if you're a scientist, and you start getting into it, you sort of have a natural inclination to be interested in law anyway. Patent law is just so much fun. It's so exciting, and you talk to really smart people all the time, and you talk about these really interesting issues, and people will disagree, and you'll have fun conversations and everything. It's so funny. Patent attorneys get really passionate about the most weedy things you can possibly imagine, but those conversations are really, really fun, and it's almost always done in a congenial place. Even if you adamantly disagree, you still want to go and have a beer later. You have respect for the debate. I would just say, don't let some superficial discussion about what patent law is to impact you. Really think about it and talk to somebody like I did when I was thinking about it. Go talk to somebody who does it and check it out and read some papers, read some blogs, read some different things and see whether it strikes your fancy. Because most of the people I know who do what we do, they just love it. And if you told me in high school, for example, that I was going to be doing this for a living, I would have told you were insane. I would have been like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know why I would do that. I think once people learn a little bit more about it, they get really excited about it.
I really like organizing events. I have a lot of ideas, generally speaking. And I told my team, I said, please take me next time I have an idea because I'm like running out of time, right? In March, we are going to do a two-part event. It's actually at your building, so Kessler, thank you. And we also have a lot of collaborators, CHIPS DC chapter, and so many amazing people. So the first part, we're going to do a live podcast interview of Alyssa Hampler, your colleague. Yay. And then one of my friends who used to be at the FAH, she was a senior executive, Cash Perkins. The second part, we are going to do a speed mentoring session. I'm working with users to get some of the stuff done. Adapt That Legal is actually going to be part of it. So I'm working on getting the organizers. And people are like, when you have time to do your work? Yeah, I got it at 4 a.m. this morning. Oh gosh. Violence today. Wow. And two, by starting the journey, I was just working. I left to work. And now it's like fulfillment actually coming to part of the picture. I was at Nepal and I was getting breakfast. I was talking to this Indian young woman and we're talking and all of a sudden I have like the letters I actually try on virtual pen gateway. And she was like, tell me what you do. Yeah. So I told her. She goes like, there's someone that I follow in your area and I've been following her post on LinkedIn and I thought that was really interesting post. I wonder if you know her. I said, put on LinkedIn and tell me who you follow. So she followed. I said, that was me.
That's so funny. Well, that's real validation.
I mean, it's like from someone who basically was just a wallflower.
Yeah.
Did not want to speak.
Random people at breakfast know who you are.
Oh, there's like 4 people that came to me. I was at the IP network happy hour at the harbor. And this woman came up to me and said that, oh, we were in the DC chapter, the one that was at Baker McKinsey, the whole panel of amazing women. And she was like, you were too busy talking to other people. I couldn't get an inch talking to you. So I was waiting to get my ginger out. And she goes like, I wanted to say hi because I didn't get a chance to say hi to you in DC.
so
I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that I'm a celebrity. I think it has been really amazing. And later today, I'm going to be doing a live LinkedIn with 2 brand strategists and the managing counsel of Duolingo. We'll definitely do a disclaimer. I hope this has been a good segue of your daily, and I really enjoy having this chat with you, Jackie.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is fun. I enjoy this too. It does put a little sparkle in your day when you're otherwise just doing your work. So thank you for
many sparkles.
Yeah. This is terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.